for example, it's a truism among cosmologists that the laws of time and space, the laws of science, break down at the singularity. And there's no difference between saying that and saying something that we can't explain from within the confines of our materialist understanding emerged at the origin to bring all things into being. There's a miracle lurking in there somewhere. And of course, the biologists are also stuck with the problem of the origin of life, which they hand wave about constantly, but have been completely unable to account for. And so my friend Jonathan Pajot, you know, his insistence is that if he's going to accept a miracle, he'll accept the miracle that proclaims that the cosmos itself is founded on sacrifice. And that's a completely different framework of conceptualization that I unpack to a large degree in my book, because you can make a very strong case that perception itself is a sacrificial endeavor. And so Dawkins' metaphysics is very narrowly empirical and very narrowly enlightenment. And part of the problem with that is that there are also just things that Dawkins doesn't know. And I would say in his favor, and in the favor of our discussion, is that near the end of that discussion, we did have a meeting of minds, because we started to talk about how the evolution of narrative in the manner that he represented as memes could have a long-term effect on the genetic evolution of humanity. And he got very excited about that. And I was thrilled about that, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Dawkins is because I think some of his ideas, especially the idea of meme, has far more significance than he thinks it does.
Right.
Now, part of the problem is there's a whole literature that Richard Dawkins knows nothing about. So, for example, he doesn't know anything about the work of a man named Mircea Eliade, who's was the preeminent historian of religion for years. He's out of favor in academia because he's not a postmodern, hedonistic, power-mad nihilist. And, you know, Eliade was one of those people who thinks that there was something fundamental about the structure of mythology and narrative. And Dawkins doesn't know anything about that entire field of endeavor. And that's a major problem, given that he's also very concerned with the evolution of our ability to abstract. And I was trying to move the discussion in that direction, and that happened very successfully near the end of it. So
there's a brilliant, in the Telegraph review, actually, of your book, there's a really good line there where they said Peterson's at his best when he brings alive the pathological behavior of the Bible's bad guys, from Cain to the whore of Babylon, by everyone who dawdles, resents, exhibits pride, worships false idols, complains, lies, accuses, wallows in victimhood, and fails to live up to their responsibilities or talents. It's all on you, he writes, with God as a guide. And I love that, because that was a big takeaway from the book for me, is, again, the way you take the text of the Bible, the Old Testament, but you make the point that if you bring it forward to today, all of those things there, you know, when I look at Trump's big win in America, for example, yes, it was to do with the economy and cost of living, no question. Yes, it was to do with the border crisis and people genuinely concerned about what's been going on there. But it was also, I felt, a real repudiation of what Elon Musk calls the woke mind virus in all its guises, that people have just basically had enough of what is, ironically, a kind of modern-day fascism, the way they go about destroying people that don't sign up to their worldview. And all the things they kind of represent the woke brigade, for want of a better phrase, the wallowing in victimhood, you know, the constant whining and moaning about absolutely everything, the lack of taking personal responsibility, etc., etc. The kind of inherent laziness of so many of them as well. Very work shy, I've noticed. You put it all together and you've got all these things, all these themes from the Bible of things to avoid in the way you conduct yourself. They're in that mentality, that woke mind virus. It encourages that way of thinking. I mean, do you see a parallel there?
Well, we'll start with a practical parallel. I mean, the Trump election campaign was a great drama, and there was a kind of victimized femininity, let's say, on the Democrat side, with Kamala Harris and her cohorts really emblematic of that. And then what did we have on the Trump side? Well, one of the most dramatic portrayals, maybe the most dramatic portrayal of what we had on the Trump side, was Trump's response to being shot. It was like this,
Yeah.
right? Go to hell. You're not stopping me, no matter what. And like, as Musk pointed out, that's not staged. And, you know, it was so interesting watching the victimized Democrat response to that, because their response was open-mouthed amazement that anything like that could even be possible. It must have been a hoax, because no one could possibly react like that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, wrong. Trump could react like that. And despite whatever faults he might have, that's what he's like. He got up and said, "You're not stopping me no matter what." And, you know, more power to him. And I don't think it's an overestimate to presume that that won him the election.
I totally
and you
agree.
can see the immense literary drama there.
You know what, Jordan? I've just written exactly that. I've done the Spectator magazine diary this week. And I said, when I think back, I spoke to Trump 4 times in the last few weeks of the race, including a week after he got shot, when he saw me talking about it on TV in America, and he called me. And we had a fascinating conversation. He said it had reinvigorated his faith in God, because he said God must have wanted me to survive. Because he said literally he was alive because he moved his head half an inch to read some charts on the teleprompter. And if he hadn't, he'd be dead. And secondly, that he, you know, I said to him, amazing you're back out doing rallies so soon. And he went, well, I knew if I didn't do it quickly, I may not ever do it, which I thought was one of the very few times I've seen any vulnerability for Trump. But of course that. But the balls, not just to stand back up when he got shot, to stand back up saying fight, 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 when he didn't know if there were other shooters out there. But secondly, to get back on a stage in front of 20,000 people, none of whom you know, a week later, and to keep doing it, sometimes much bigger crowds, especially when there was a second attempt to kill him a few weeks later, where literally a Secret Service agent walking ahead of him on a golf course saw the barrel of an AK-47 poke out of a bush. And if he hadn't, Trump would have been there 4 minutes later and would be dead. So twice in the space of 2 months, Trump came very, very close to being assassinated. And yet it didn't stop him getting back out there. And I do think, when I think back on the whole thing, there were lots of components to why he won, not least the incompetence of the opposition. However, I think regular Americans, and the rest of the world actually, but regular Americans looked at his strength literally under fire, and his resilience and his determination to keep pounding on. I think they looked at that and thought, you know what, after everything that's been thrown at him, the weaponizing of the justice system, literal attempts to kill him, and all the rest of it, look at him, he's still pounding on. And it's a really admirable quality in a man, right?
Absolutely. Well, and, you know, you pointed out that it wasn't only the fact that he immediately leapt up on stage and basically said, go to hell, you're not stopping me.
Yeah.
But then also that he continued to speak and didn't take, what would you say, even perhaps warranted precautions. It's the perfect thing to do psychologically, because if you shrink away in consequence of that threat, you live in fear for the rest of your life. And Trump's determination was obviously, no matter what, I won't live in fear. And that's the same decision Job makes, by the way, in the book of Job. It's a decision not to lose faith and not to live in fear, no matter what, right? No matter what. And that is a manifestation of the spirit that is indomitable. And I think that is a reflection of the image of God.
Yeah.
And so,
you know, Jordan,
I don't think the divine providence with regards to Trump wasn't the fact that he turned his head at the proper moment. The divine providence with regard to Trump was that he jumped up immediately afterwards and said, "You're not stopping me."
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree.